Hey homeschool friends. So my two big kids have just taken off with reading lately. It's been phenomenal, and I truly believe it's because I started combining Abeka with All About Reading. And you can see my latest update to see a little bit more details about where my kids were and some of those decisions. But in this video, I really want to focus on the two different programs and how I believe that they're really complementary, that one of the programs will be strong where the other is weak and vice versa. They just go so well together. And I haven't heard of that many people using Abeka and All About Reading at the same time for phonics. And so that's what this video is about. So hopefully you find this interesting. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel if you're new here, and welcome back if you've been coming for a while. Like I said, this is a video about how I use both Abeka and All About Reading for phonics for my kids. I've been using the Abeka K5 and the All About Reading Level 1 for my 6.5-year-old. And I've been using Abeka Grade 1 and All About Reading Level 2 for my second grader, who is 7, almost 8. So those are the only programs I'm speaking to today, although at this point in time, my intention is to continue on with that, to go on with All About Reading Level 3 and Abeka Grade 2 for next year, just because I'm really enjoying how they complement each other. And then the other thing I wanted to mention before I hop into things is this is not going to be a flip through video. I actually have a video comparing All About Reading to Logic of English, where I flip through the different resources for All About Reading. And then I do have a video coming up where I plan to detail the Abeka program as well as all the different resources and manipulatives that I have picked up thus far. So please stay tuned for that, subscribe, all those things so you won't miss that. But let me hop into the video. So I'm organizing this in about 3 parts. I think I will start with Abeka. I'll give it like pros and cons, and then I'll talk about how All About Reading supports those cons that I have. And then I'll do the opposite, where I will talk about All About Reading, pros and cons, and then talk about how Abeka can support what I feel is the weaknesses in the All About Reading program. And then I will end the video with exactly how we are combining them, if you're curious about that. But I hope this is really useful information for you all. So Abeka. It is a very traditional homeschool program. We currently only use the language arts, and we only use the phonics part of the language arts. Like, we don't use the spelling. We do use the handwriting, but mostly I'm focusing on phonics today. So the first pro I have for Abeka is that there is a lot of practice built into the program. There is a lot of repetition. There's a lot of chance for the child to revisit certain skills, to keep on working on them. So it's very spiral in nature. And I love that about Abeka, is it really keeps coming back to all the things that they need to learn. A second pro for me is it has a very detailed instructor's guide. So here's the instructor's guide for Abeka, and it is a big, thick book with lots of things to say. And I feel like this can be intimidating, but to me, I really wanted my handheld. I wanted the program to tell me what flashcards to bring out, what manipulatives to bring out to help with that lesson. So I really like the teacher's guide. The third thing that is a pro, and I think this is a huge pro, this might be the top pro for me, and that is that it gets kids reading fast. And I would say initially I wouldn't have cared so much about that, but it has boosted my kids' confidence in their ability to read, and it has just lit a fire under them as to like their excitement to getting to read, because it has given them certain rules and certain tricks really to speed up the learning process, and it's been fantastic. So I really have appreciated that about Abeka. So the fourth pro that I have is that it is phonics based. It is not sight word based. The program teaches the kids how to sound out the words. It focuses a lot on special sounds and blending, especially in the earlier K4, K5 programs. It does a lot of the blending the first 2 letters, so the consonant vowel letters together. It does that, which I think has been very good, especially for my daughter, my 6-year-old, who is struggling to blend CVC words together. That has been a huge pro for her. That has probably helped her the most. So that's been excellent. The program also uses special sounds. Really, that's just teaching a lot of the consonant blends. So like ST is st, BL is bl, things like that. And so it teaches it with enough repetition that they'll just see it in the words, and they won't have to think about blending it. They will just have practice recognizing and saying that special sound enough that it just flows much quicker for them, and it increases their ability to read. Okay, so those are the pros. Lots of good pros. I highly recommend the Abeka program, but there is one big con in my head after using Abeka for a while, and that is that it lacks a bit of depth, maybe a bit of like, why does this work this way? It's not based off of understanding the depth of the phonics or understanding why the words are the way they are, things like that. And so it does give a lot of good, helpful rules, like the 1-vowel rule, the 2-vowel rule, things like that, that just really helps the kids start reading, but it doesn't explain it a lot. And that really is my biggest and only con for Abeka. But what is fantastic is that All About Reading excels at that. The why behind the phonics. And so let me hop into All About Reading. I'll go through the pros and cons list for that as well. But I just love the fact that what All About Reading is good at, in my opinion, is where Abeka lacks. And so they go really well together. Okay, so as for All About Reading, like I said, one major pro is its ability to really teach the why behind the phonics. It dives into a lot of things a lot earlier than Abeka does. It focuses a lot on syllables, so different syllable rules for how to split the words apart, to know if you need to say the long sound in the first syllable or the short sound in the first syllable, and how to do that. It teaches that in level 2, where that so far hasn't been taught at all in Abeka. Even though in grade 1, Abeka is well ahead of the number of phonograms it has taught. All About Reading hasn't taught nearly as many, but it's doing things like teaching about the syllables. It introduces the different sounds of many of the letters a lot earlier than Abeka does. Let me see if I can think of anything else. Oh, it also does the different jobs of the silent E. And so it handles things in a much more precise way, I guess is the best way to put it. It teaches the kids a deeper understanding of phonics in the English language. And so that is a huge plus of the program. Another pro, which I think was one of my favorite parts of the program, is it has so many games and activities. It is very interactive. It definitely helps out kids that are maybe more kinesthetic in nature, so they can get up and hop around and play the games. It's just more tactile, and that's just fantastic. My kids just love the games, and so I love that about All About Reading. Definitely a pro. The other pros for All About Reading are similar to Abeka. First, that it has a very good and detailed teacher's guide that tells you exactly what you need to have, exactly what you need to say, all the different resources you need to collect, things like that. So it's fantastic as well. And then the other pro is that it is also very phonics based and not sight word based. So I love that about both of those programs. So All About Reading is a fantastic program. My kids have learned a bunch with it. I just found that this is the program where we stalled out a bit with both of my kids, and Abeka was what I used to come in and fill in some of those gaps. So let me talk about some of those gaps. Let me talk about some cons of All About Reading. The first con for me is that it was taught in a way that felt more mastery. Like the skills were introduced in a much slower fashion, and more time was spent on each, say, like each phonogram or understanding initial blends or final blends or things like that. And the idea was that you kind of taught that almost to mastery. You could keep going on and practicing some of those skills as you went, but the program in and of itself did not spiral. Not nearly in the way that Abeka does, not nearly in the way where it will bring a concept that was taught 2 months ago and put it on a worksheet. And maybe that's the big reason, because there's really no worksheets in All About Reading, which is a good thing. But for my kids, it was a little bit of a deficit because it didn't have enough review in that kind of spiral manner. And so that is, to me, was a con. I know the mastery approach can be a plus for some people, but not for my kids. And so the second con really kind of links up to that one, is that because it's taught to more mastery, it's very slow in its progression. It takes a long time to get enough phonograms so that the kids can feel like they can read a little bit better. So my kids really couldn't take off. They couldn't pick up any additional readers. They really were a little bit slowed down by the speed of the program. But the problem was, it wasn't necessarily that they could just go faster, but because they were partly getting bogged down by some of the things in the program. And so it was just a little bit of a struggle. So for me, having it be such a slow progression didn't really help. It resulted in them kind of losing confidence in themselves. And so like I was saying with Abeka just teaches it faster, and they have gained so much confidence. And even though like maybe they don't teach it quite as well as All About Reading, they're able to take off significantly. Both of my kids have just really been opened up to a lot of new readers. They can pick up a lot of things now that they have the skills taught from Abeka. And so that's just been fantastic. So that is kind of a con for me, just the progression of how slow All About Reading can be. Just doesn't give them the skills fast enough is how it felt to me. And it's not like my kids were young in these levels. It's not like I was trying to push them at too young of an age. And another con for All About Reading, I don't know, this is a very specific con, so maybe this won't land with a lot of people, but in level 1, about halfway through the program, it really focuses on consonant blends, like beginning blends and ending blends, like final blends and initial blends. And the problem with that is it gave so much new information, like all of those blends, like FL, BL, CL, BR, DR, like there was so many that were given all in one lesson, and then the following lesson was the final blends, like LD, ND, like there was just so many, and my kids were just like super overwhelmed. And I tried to take a lot of time on all those. Like there was like 5 pages of fluency words for those weeks, and it was just like my kids just got bogged down by that. And what I love about Abeka is they just teach it in a different way. They teach it via special sounds, like I was saying. And that's just really fantastic. They'll just introduce a couple special sounds every lesson, like they're learning about FR and GR, and then the next week it's GL and BL or whatever. And so it's like, it gives it to them in piecemeal and it teaches them to recognize it. And that just has worked so much better for my kids than this just gigantic 2 lessons of the initial and final consonant blends. That just drove me nuts. So that's a very specific con, I realize, but that was a tough one for me. And I'd say the last con, although I liked the detail of the teacher's guide of All About Reading, I felt like I did not know what to do when my kids started struggling, or that they weren't able to master some of the word cards. Then the word cards would just stack up on them and they just weren't getting enough skills, or I wasn't figuring out how to play enough games or the right games, or I just didn't know what to do, and it wasn't helping me very well. And I know there's a lot of stuff in the back, and I read through all that. I read through all of the front. So I definitely read through their resources. I just needed more hand-holding for when things started to go south, I guess. And really what that did push me to was Abeka, which is the topic of this video, because Abeka really helped me fix the issues I was having with All About Reading. So after all the pros and cons and comparisons, if you're still with me, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we are doing specifically. So in a nutshell, I am using Abeka first, and then I am coming back through with All About Reading. And it works really well because for all those reasons, I can get them going faster. I can expose them to that and start this viral approach with Abeka. And then I can come behind with All About Reading to give more of that depth, more of that ability to understand. So they've already seen some of these special sounds or concepts like a couple times, first in maybe K5 and now in grade 1. And then by the time All About Reading gets around to like the double E vowel team in level 2, they've already seen double E a number of times. And now we can take the lesson from All About Reading and really get into it. And they can really appreciate some of those details because they already have a really good bank of understanding for how to read a word that has 2 E's in the middle. They just use the 2 vowel rule from Abeka and they understand how to read it. And what I love about All About Reading is that All About Reading teaches that solidly, but it also gives some exceptions, it gives some nuance, and I feel like All About Reading does that exceptionally well. And so it's really helpful for me to have gone through it with Abeka before going through it with All About Reading. So we basically use Abeka, and then 1 day a week we have an All About Reading day. So I do about 2 to 3 days of Abeka, whether we do 1 or 2 lessons a day, it just kind of depends. And then we end our week usually with All About Reading, where I do 2 lessons, the phonogram lesson and the reader lesson at the end of the week. And it just really works because anything in All About Reading is not really new at that point. They've already seen it all. So it really works. I feel like I've said that too many times. So I hope that was understandable. I hope I was able to articulate that well enough as to my excitement for I feel like how these programs really complement each other and work so well together. So let me know down below, do you use either of these programs? Have you ever considered using both? I would love to know because I don't feel like I've heard of anybody else doing this. I don't know if that feels a little over the top to some of you. Go ahead and let me know that down below as well if you would like. But otherwise, that is what I have for this video. If you found it helpful, which I hope you did, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel if you aren't already subscribed. But otherwise, I will see you in the next homeschool video. All right, guys, have a wonderful day.